Just a quick training for Manchester Metropolitan University to show you how Qualtrics is used in academia. So if you aren't familiar with Qualtrics, your university has a license in the business school. A couple of things you might want to know. So Qualtrics is a research platform. It's used for survey-based research, but it also has the flexibility to do other types of research as well, which I'll cover in a few minutes. The idea is that it's a more engaging, more accessible platform that will enable you to get better quality data and get that data in half the time. So it's a very accessible platform, very easy platform to use from start to finish. So we are used in the top business schools globally. So the 100 top business schools across the world. Within the UK, we're used by the top 50 business schools. We're also used by universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, the University of Manchester, Manchester Metropolitan, obviously. And so a couple of reasons why we're used so widely. So we do multiple types of research, essentially survey-based research, but also experimental research, 360 evaluation, longitudinal studies, and also conjoint analysis. We have the flexibility to do reaction timing, randomization, and scoring. So for example, if you're doing something more like A/B testing or experimental research, we're fully mobile optimized as well. So again, increasing your chances of getting top quality responses and getting a higher response rate. So why would you use Qualtrics? So we are one of the most stringent in terms of data security. So we do meet data protection requirements in the UK and in the EU, and we are GDPR compliant as well. We are very accessible, so we are easy enough for students to use if you do not have a research background. We also have a lot of sophisticated functionality for data that you may want to publish, etc. And I'll go into what that looks like later. You can collaborate with colleagues and with your supervisor very easily, so all at the click of a button. And we also have 24/7 award-winning support and training as well. So we have a support and training team. It is available via chat, email and phone, and that's 24/7. It's based in Dublin, and also we have a team based in the US as well. So that means it's 24/7, and we have very good pickup rates on the first call, very, very good resolution rates as well. Okay, so just to jump into the platform. So from a front-end perspective, so what do your participants see? So Qualtrics is a very engaging platform, very accessible, particularly on mobile. Even questions that are quite gamified, we can see are very easily manipulated on mobile as well. For something like a 7-point matrix table, we can see that you can very easily scroll through that within the platform. And again, for something like do you live on campus, we can customize the follow-up responses based on how people interact with the question. So we can set up logics and conditional branching. So for example, if we were asking, do you live on campus, we put in a map of our campus here, and we can ask people to interact with that pretty easily. So this is just to give you a sense of the type of questions that we have available and how accessible they are. And again, if we wanted to ask the question, which social media outlet do you use, we can ask this in a very engaging way for participants as well. So again, just to show you the types of things that we can do, so we have logic set up here in the background. So if someone says they're a detractor, or they do not want to, if they're not likely to recommend your university to a colleague or a friend, we can see that one question appears. And again, a different question appears if people say that they're a promoter or that they are likely to recommend. This is just to give you an example of where you might want to drill down further on particular questions. And also it helps with the user experience as well. So obviously someone doesn't have to scroll through multiple questions that are irrelevant. If we could just ask the right question based on their responses or based on any other information we might have about them. Okay, so that's the front end perspective. In terms of the back end perspective, what we can see going into the platform is the list of all our projects that we've got available at any one point. These are separated into folders. So what is quite useful is that you can very easily share folders with colleagues and with supervisors, etc. Okay, one thing that might be quite useful is that you can share each project very easily as well. So if I was to bring in the name of one of my colleagues here, I can choose exactly how I want to collaborate with them. So if I'm working with a supervisor, I might want them just to see my reports and my data analytics, but I might not want them to edit the survey, to change any of the logics we've set up, etc. Another thing, obviously, if you are working with someone outside of the university, you may want to remove any personal data. So again, keeping that data as secure as possible. And because you have a lot of flexibility here, it also means that if someone leaves the university or if someone is no longer working on a project, you can very easily remove access to that project. That will disappear from their account. And it's just one good way of safeguarding any data that you collect. From a security perspective, Qualtrics doesn't own your survey, it doesn't own any of your data. We have no access to that data, so we are data agnostic. So we're blind to anything that you collect, which is really important in terms of meeting ethical requirements within the university. And obviously in terms of copyright, we've no claim to that data either. Okay, so to begin creating a project, we can create a blank survey project, so a survey project from scratch. We can import data from another project or even bring in an existing form. So this might be useful if you are collaborating, let's say consent forms, if you're collaborating particular questions or blocks with colleagues, you can easily bring them in. Qualtrics has a lot of experience with academics, so we have an awful lot of questions and surveys from other universities as well. And this might be helpful, might save you some time. So for example, bringing in an informed consent form, maybe bringing in a research application, etc. For the sake of the training, I'm just going to create a project from scratch. A couple of things to note about Qualtrics. So it is a very intuitive platform. So if I was to ask, how satisfied are you with X? Again, clicking anywhere on the screen will bring in all the appropriate answers, but you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you do with these as well. So you can remove options, you can change the wording, we can bring in other automated choices, etc. So we actually have 50 plus automated choices. The reason we have these obviously is just to save you an awful lot of time in terms of building something like a matrix scale. So again, if we were to put this into matrix format, we can do that with 2 clicks. And again, it just saves you an awful lot of time. Qualtrics has over 100 different question types. So we have the standard question types that you might expect: multiple choice, matrix table, text entry. And again, we have things that are a little bit more interactive or gamified. So graphic sliders, which we saw earlier. We can work with images, videos and audio. We can work with heat maps. So if you want to bring in a map or an image and get people to interact with that on the screen, you can do that very easily as well. For experimental research, we have the likes of reaction timing, display control, etc. We can collect other information on the back end. So this meta info question, for example, what you can do is on the back end record things like browser type, operating system, whether the browser is flash enabled, etc. The reason this is important is if you are doing an online experiment or a study where you need to control conditions, this is one way of recording those, I suppose, all those variables which you can then control for at a later stage. Okay, so just to set up something that looks a little bit more like a survey. So I'm going to create a question from scratch. And again, your first question is usually something like a consent form. Okay, so again, it brings in all the appropriate answers, but I do want to remove some of these. Now, with a consent form, if someone does not consent to take part, you'll typically want to skip them out of the survey. And you can do that very easily. So if they select no, they're skipped to the end of the survey. And again, that just helps you meet ethical requirements. Obviously, you're not putting participants through a survey that they don't want to be a part of. Okay, so just to show you again, so skip logic, very easy to set up, 2 clicks for something that is, I suppose, quite advanced in a lot of platforms. Okay, so I might want to collect some demographic information. Now, rather than going question by question, I just want to show you, I suppose, where you can save an awful lot of time. So Qualtrics has a very extensive library. Potentially your university has a library of their own as well. So this can include surveys, blocks of questions, etc. If I want to bring in a particular question, I want to bring in demographic question. We have lots of examples here. So, what is your zip code? Maybe income-based questions. Here I'm just going to bring in one around education. I'm going to bring that in, and you can see very easy to do that within 2 clicks. Okay, if you wanted to set up something more like an experimental condition, you might want to set up a control block. And I'm not going to set up anything too advanced here. It's really just to show you how, I suppose, the back end works. So for the sake of it, I'm just going to show you how we would set up a heat map. So potentially you might want someone to interact with an ad or an image, if you're doing ad testing, brand awareness, etc. I'm just going to bring in an example of something I've already uploaded. So let's just say a kind of typical ad campaign, for example. Okay. And what we can do is we can codify these different regions so that we can analyze them later. Obviously this is fully customizable, but really just to show you, it enables participants to interact very easily with images on the screen, for example. Or if you want them to stick to particular blocks, we can set it up as a hotspot. So this just means that they interact with various parts of an image as you've specified. So again, very useful for things like campaign studies, ad testing, etc. We see it used where people bring in maps, for example, if they want to get a sense of where people are based, where they're from, etc. We see it in psychological research where people need to interact with various stimuli. But for the sake of this study or this test, I just want to show you a couple of different examples of unique question types to Qualtrics. So again, you might want to ask something like, how do you feel about this, what to say, stimulus? And it's really just to show you the more interactive question types. So we've multiple kind of gauges, etc. We've slider questions, grade questions. Used an awful lot, not just to make the survey more engaging, but it's used an awful lot with younger age groups, children, anyone with kind of less literacy. We find we get better quality responses when the survey is a little bit more accessible, a little bit more engaging. Okay, so another thing you might want to look at is the experimental condition. It's really just to show you how blocks work and where they come in handy. So I'm going to create a few questions here. Okay, and I might want to have a follow-up block or a block where I collect contact information. So I'm going to call this follow-up. So again, you might want to set up some sort of logic. So do you want to take part in our follow-up? And again, you might want to base this around, whether people have any questions, concerns. They might want to add in, their contact details, so you can reach out to them afterwards. And you can collect that here. So the reason you might want to set this up as a separate block is that potentially you want to keep all of your responses anonymous, but you do want to collect contact information for those who require any follow-up. And you can do that very easily. Okay, so we've added a text entry here. We'll make this into a form. And if I ask something like name here, it brings in all the appropriate questions. What is quite useful, so where you are collecting any sort of text information, obviously there's a lot of variation. People can add dates in multiple different ways, or they can add even kind of contact IDs, participant IDs, etc. in multiple ways. And obviously you can't use that data, or you need to do a lot of manual reworking. If you validate within the platform, it actually is much more, useful in terms of the data that you get out. So again, just to give an example, with the postal code, you might want to validate a UK postal code. Email addresses, if you're collecting them, you might want to, ensure that they meet certain standards, etc. And again, that you can use that data, and your participants are less likely to, add any mistakes or errors to the data that they input. Okay. So again, you want to set up a logic. So just to show you how different types of logic work. So if someone says they do want to take part in the follow-up study, we can show them this question only in that case. Another thing that might be quite useful is we can set up logic not just on questions, but on multiple different fields. So for example, embedded data. Embedded data means that any information you already know about your participants that you've uploaded on the back end. So to give you an example, you might have contact information, first name, email address, you might have the language that they speak, the course that they're taking, their educational background, etc. If you've uploaded that into a spreadsheet into Qualtrics, you can then go and use that and set up various conditions and as well. So just to give you an idea, if we were to add, let's say gender, for example, is equal to male, only the males in the, in our study will see the follow-up questions, etc. So it's just one way of, getting the correct questions to the right participants, making the survey a bit more relevant, and to kind of cut down on the number of questions that you're asking. So to give you an example of other areas where Qualtrics can help with this setup, so in terms of the survey flow, one thing that you might want to do is randomly assign people to various different conditions. So we have all of our blocks here. We've got our demographic info. So everyone will be asked these questions, but you might want to add a randomizer. And what we mean by this is if we add our control stimulus, our experimental condition here, and we can randomly present two of the following elements. We can make sure that they're evenly presented, so that maybe 50% will, 30% of the time, or as close as possible, will see one stimulus and the other group will see the other stimulus. We can set this up really easily within the survey flow, and again, it randomly assigns people to various different groups. You can also break this out by condition. So maybe you want to randomly assign 50% of females to one condition, 50% of males to another condition, etc. You can set that up by setting up conditional logic as well. So just to show you what all of this would look like on the back end. Now obviously we've just used kind of the standard, we've used the standard option in terms of a template, so it's not overly engaging, but it does give you a sense of how quickly you can set up a survey from start to finish. And what you can do also is force responses or request responses, just to ensure that you get the type of data and the validity of the data that you need as well. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what that would look like. You can very easily change the look and feel. We have multiple different templates. We have a branded template for your university, so with their own logo and with their colours, etc. But you can come in here and edit anything, any of our own templates. So as I showed you at the very beginning, you can easily add branding to this. I can bring in a particular logo, for example, that I've uploaded from my computer. Okay. And again, we can use this to brand the template that we have. We can add custom CSS, which is available on our website, and this just helps you change the background. So you might want to add an image to the background. So if you just check out our CSS page on our support website. One thing you might want to do as well is review the survey before you send it out, to make sure obviously there's no spelling mistakes, etc. One thing that is important is the survey accessibility. So again, it gives you recommendations and examples of where things might not be overly accessible. So this might be the multiple choice here. They recommend a single answer matrix. They recommend a Likert scale. And it's really just to make sure, again, that you're getting the best out of the survey that you send out. It's as accessible as it could be. One thing I want to do here as well is just to generate some test responses. So I'm just going to bring in 55 responses. It's going to generate some dummy data, which I can then work with in the analysis section. Okay, and again, it does help you understand the accessibility of your survey as well. Here we can see that we have an average of 4.7 questions per survey. The reason it appears as like that is because we have various logic and conditions set up. So obviously people are getting routed out of the survey. Some people are seeing maybe 6 questions, other people are seeing 4 questions, and the average of that is 4.7. It would also give you an idea if your survey is not accessible. Potentially people are getting stuck at a particular point within the logic, and it will appear in red if that's the case. The other conditions that might be quite interesting for yourself is you can set up a conjoint analysis. And again, if you want a bit more information about how to set that up, I would recommend viewing our support pages. You can set up quotas. So you might want, let's say, this survey to be evenly distributed amongst male and females. And you can do that really easily as well. So potentially, your males are overrepresented, so too many of them take the survey. You're not getting an even distribution, across different groups. And you can set up a quota very easily. So that just means as soon as you hit kind of 50%, for example, or count of 50 responses, the participants who are male, for example, will be routed to the end of the survey. Okay, so another thing that you might find interesting is that we can translate the survey as well. So that means that you have the one survey in multiple languages. So obviously English is your default. We work, I think, with about 50 different languages. So just for argument's sake, we'll bring in French. Now this is brought in from Google Translate, so again it isn't us the most accurate representation. Okay, and it just takes some time then to update. We can do this question by question as well, so we can see here we've translated the whole question into French. It is brought in from Google Translate and it does save time, but obviously I would recommend coming in here and changing the translations for yourself. Okay, and the idea is, I suppose once we save this, people can view the same survey in multiple languages, and they can toggle very easily between languages. Okay. So this gives a sense of the survey build. The next section, just want to run through, is the distribution. We have multiple different options. So we've got mobile, which you can access using QR code, so people can scan in a QR code using their mobile phone. They get immediate access to the survey. You might want to do this if you're advertising surveys on a poster, for example, or even by mail. A lot of our customers pick up kind of hard to reach demographics by advertising offline. We also have the option to integrate with social media, offline app in some cases, so you can get offline access to surveys as well, so where Wi-Fi isn't accessible. SMS sometimes, and also email. So email is by far the most commonly used way to interact with participants. So I'm just going to bring in a contact list that I have already loaded. I can very easily bring in, create my own new contact list, either by importing from Excel, or by adding email address, names, etc. to a spreadsheet here in Qualtrics. Okay, so a couple of things that you want to do when you're distributing your survey. We can very easily customize by bringing in things like contact information. We may have other embedded data that we have, so we know kind of their research history, so whether they took part in other surveys, might know, for example, what course they're in, etc. You can bring all of that information in here. Just for the sake of this, I'm going to bring in someone's first name, so it's personalised. Another thing that's quite unique to Qualtrics is that we can actually bring in questions into the survey, and we find that this really increases the number of responses that we get on any survey. So obviously it doesn't look very good here, but if you were to pick this up in your email, it would appear as a multiple choice question. Okay, so obviously you can customize this a lot further, but just for the sake of the training today, just to show you how quick it is to send out and what you can do on the back end. I'm just sending this to a group of participants. I can schedule reminders to all of those who haven't taken part in the survey. I can schedule this in advance. I'll schedule a thank you for all those who have finished the survey. And again, this really increases the chances of boosting response rates, etc. The other thing to think about potentially is if you do not have access to a particular demographic. So if you're working with maybe entrepreneurs in the Manchester region who speak a couple of languages or have a particular background, that might not be something that you have access to yourself, and you may need help finding that sample. So we often work with universities providing good quality respondents through our panel. So we are a panel aggregator. We work with panel companies across the world. So we have hundreds of thousands of willing participants for studies, and they're screened by their demographic details. So if you're looking for entrepreneurs, we could very easily find them for you. It's a pay per response type model. And that would depend on the type of demographic that you're looking at. So maybe if it's a very hard to reach demographic, it would cost a little bit more than general public. Also depends on how long the survey is, etc. Obviously the best way is if you have access to that yourself. This is only a kind of a fallback solution. Qualtrics does have a lot of resources in that area. The idea is that we can get those responses to you very quickly, and that they're very high quality as well. So it does save time if you're approaching research deadlines. Okay, so running on to the data analysis, many of the universities we work with will choose to export their data to SPSS or into Excel or even to Tableau. We can do that very easily. To give you a sense, within a CSV, for example, you might want to choose exactly which type of sort of questions, etc. you do export, the types of the formatting, etc. And you have a lot of options here. Just to show you a couple of the options for analytics we have available within the platform. So we have text analytics. Now obviously I haven't collected much in the way of text in this survey, so I'm going to bring in a different survey. And we have one here that we have around hotel satisfaction. So we asked the question, how satisfied are you with various services? And people wrote in various questions. So, it's not good value for money, etc. So one thing, when you have open text questions, oftentimes we don't use the data as extensively as we could. Potentially we're missing out on a lot of really important information. So what we can do here is set up a thematic analysis or a text analysis. Again, I want to look at particular words, for example. So it uses Boolean search terms, so we can use or, so good or nice or friendly. And we only want this to appear for staff members or service members. Once we search this, it's going to bring up all the topics that are, or all the responses that are relevant, and we can very easily add or tag our theme here. Okay. So what it does is it quantifies all your themes, etc., which you can then use to either build kind of particular word webs or word clouds. Also, what you can do is you want to use this for kind of quantitative analysis. So look at, let's say, the number of times, the frequency of themes per demographic, etc. So it's very easily done. Obviously, we can export you can add all of your data to another text analytics program as well. But it just saves you time if you can do that within Qualtrics. Okay, the other thing you might want to look at is our reporting section. So if you are to get a kind of quick overview of what your data looks like, you can do this really easily within Qualtrics. So if you kind of want to eyeball your responses halfway through your study. So here, just to give you a sense, we've only collected text information, so we're getting something like a word cloud. And what is quite useful is you can edit stock words. So, here we've got words like bit, which we don't really need. We have, so it gets rid of kind of those words that you don't really need. Okay, and obviously we can edit the word cloud per the number of responses that we need as well. Okay, so I'm going to bring in the survey that we just created. So again, just to show you all of the data that we collected, we created some dummy data. It is automatically showing here in real time. So I haven't come in here and created this report in advance. It's all formatted immediately when the survey is taken. And you can edit this very easily. You can change the type of graphic. You can change the colors, etc. We can bring in various tables and crosstabs, etc. And again, you can do this per each section as well. You might want to add a breakout or a filter. So you might want to filter, just see the responses that came in over mobile, those that came in over email, etc. Another thing you might want to do is break out, maybe you want to compare particular groups. For example, you want to compare everyone who has a high school education versus college education. You can use those variables then to create filters and breakouts within the report. Okay. One thing that a lot of people like is being able to share the report in real time, so you can collaborate very easily with your supervisor, with colleagues, etc. So if you're working with someone outside of the university, you might want to send a public report. And why this is quite nice is that they have all of this data in real time, so that they can keep on top of the data that's coming in as well, and they can use that for analysis, etc. Okay, and you can password protect that for any sensitive data. So based on feedback that we've got from a lot of universities, they wanted a bit more flexibility in terms of the reports that they build. So we've created this advanced reporting tool as well. Okay. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like. Now obviously this is a blank report. We can bring in the likes of our logo, for example, so we can customize fully. Maybe we want to bring in other data, other instructions on how to read the report. And we can bring in various visualizations as well. So just to give you a sense, I'm going to bring in a pie chart. I'm going to select the survey or select the question. So here where I select the surveys or select the question that I want to bring in. So let's say, do you want to take part? It's going to bring in all of that data. We can very easily customize as we wish as well. Okay, so just to show you what something like this could look like, I'm going to bring in a report from another client that we work with. So now this is a fake report. It's dummy data, so I'm not sharing any sensitive information here. It's really just to show you what everything could look like in one of our advanced reports. So we can bring in the logo, we've brought in instructions, etc. So it is quite nice. It's in PDF format. You can actually export this and share this in real time as well. So it is an online report. But if you just want to have a report to kind of export and use in kind of PDF format, you can very easily do that as well. What people like as well is that you can schedule report emails to be sent out, maybe once a month, to your collaborator or to your supervisor, etc. So just to conclude, so we've run all the way from survey build, how quick and easy that was, to distribution, data analysis, and then reporting. So hopefully all of that you'll find quite accessible. Just to show you, we do have a lot of support and training as well. We have a 24/7 support team. And just to show you how you can access this. So we have a very good support page. So for example, if you have any particular questions about something that's a bit more, I suppose, complicated maybe. So embedded data, for example. It's like a Google search bar. We'll bring up all the appropriate terms. And we do have videos and step-by-step guides for all of our features as well. So we will find an awful lot of support on the website. Also, as I mentioned, we do have 24/7 support here, so that would be by phone, email and chat. You can reach out to our support team. And we also have our community. So again, if you have very specific research designs, if you want to kind of tap into a community of subject matter experts and other Qualtrics users, you can do that here as well within Qualtrics community. Okay, so that concludes the Qualtrics training. If you have any questions about any of these, if it's a support question, I would certainly recommend getting in touch with our support team for the fastest response. But if you have any training related questions, if you have any questions around using some of the features or how Qualtrics is used in universities, I would recommend reaching out to myself. My name is Therese, so if you want to contact me, it's Therese M, so TheresEM @qualtrics.com. Thank you.